Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you another build in our series, Building Nancy Drew in The Sims 4. This is part 3 of 3 of my build of Ramsey Hall from Nancy Drew Warnings at Waverly Academy. And this part of the series for Ramsey Hall in general has the classroom on the bottom level and kind of the bonus spaces, as well as the entire exterior and landscaping of the build. So this is the build that will kind of complete the entire building itself and make it ready for all of you. So here we are working on the classroom area. It's kind of interesting because Ramsey Hall, in addition to having dorm room space and a library, also has a bunch of classrooms. So it's really a multifunctional building. This particular room, Nancy goes into towards the end of the mystery and is able to get some clues from inside here. But she's only able to look at a couple of things. And what it appears to be is kind of just like a multi-purpose classroom. There's this board in the front, so I made sure to put the big board that we actually got from Get to Work as part of the detective career. So you can put notes on that board, which is kind of fun. I wanted to put a couple of easels in here so it could also be like maybe for an art class of some sort. Students could definitely bring their laptops in here and study. I add some bookshelves. At first I thought about maybe adding some desks in here, but then I figured that bookshelves would both fill in the space better and be a little bit more functional. So that's what we do in this room. Just trying to maintain the same kind of feel that the entire building has with these other rooms, because now we're moving on to these bonus rooms, which we don't see in the game, and they don't necessarily have to exist, but based on how I had to change the floor plan, because if you watch the first two parts, or even just one of the first two parts, I probably mentioned how the building itself on the outside, Ramsey Hall, is different than the building on the inside, and getting the floor plan to work in The Sims 4 definitely required some creativity. So the build itself actually has these two bonus rooms, and I decided to make them super functional as like university study spaces. So this first one is definitely a research room and a study room. And I put 4 of the research machines from the Sims 4 University Pack so that your students can just study a whole bunch of topics. It's great for preparing for the debate kind of thing, and I thought it just fit in really well at Waverly Academy. Like, I feel like if this building has so many other common area spaces and so many other spaces for learning, they probably would have a space where students can just go to research. That definitely seems to be a big part of their curriculum at Waverly Academy, is that students learn how to research, and they learn how to research thoroughly. And I figured that this space would be a great place to do it. It would also just be kind of a nice little hangout area, so that's why I put the fireplace and the couch and the chairs. Just be a nice space to also, I mean, you could still research on at those chairs or anything. You could read books and whatnot and take notes and everything. Just tried to fill it up as much as possible and make it feel like a really functional space. And I'm not sure why I was looking around there. Just checking things out. Oh yeah, giving Izzy a computer, because she has a computer there in the game. And then I just copied the room over because I wanted to keep basically the same flooring, the same walls, the same kind of furniture in general. But then this second bonus room is going to be a little bit more of like a club meeting space. So I put a couple of other functional objects in here. I put the chess tables that I'm kind of placing here. I put just regular computers rather than the study computers, because the research machines do not function as regular computers. So I added a couple regular computers, and I put up all the club posters, and I assumed that each of those posters would kind of be a different student organization that students at Waverly could join. So there's probably like an art society, there probably is a math and an engineering club, there's probably a debate club. So all sorts of those things I decided to add in there. And I imagined that this would be a room that students could like rent out, and then they could have their club meetings in here. They would just sign up for it on a schedule, and then they would be able to do whatever they need to do in that room. This is just me checking over to make sure that I got all of the rooms done. Again, this was a massive build, so I wanted to be extra sure that I was getting every single inch of this build as close as I possibly could to the original, maintaining the integrity of one of my favorite buildings in the entire series. It's definitely possible that it is my favorite building in the series, but there are just so many good ones. that makes it really impossible to choose. If you guys had to pick, what is your favorite single building in the Nancy Drew series? I mean, this building, Ramsey Hall, is pretty fantastic. I feel like Blackmore Manor is amazing. It's just so stunning. Wickford Castle is incredible. The Golden Gardenia. A lot of the earlier games have just kind of single locations, but then those single locations are fleshed out so beautifully that they just have so much character to them, which I love. Sally's Cabin is fantastic. There's just so many good places in these games. It's so wonderful. So now I'm starting to work on the landscaping and the exterior of Ramsey Hall. When Nancy comes up to the build, there's like this courtyard in the front. So I'm trying to mimic that idea using terrain paint. It ends up being just a little bit wonky because the terrain paint, you can't get it exactly the right way. Like, I mean, you can, but it takes a lot of finagling to get it to be the right proportions because it doesn't snap directly to the grid. That's what I'm trying to say. It's more like painting than it is like just snapping to the grid and placing furniture or floor tiles, for example. And then I surround the build. I do have this build on a giant 64 by 64 lot. And when I put the fence around it, it did look like it could probably fit on a smaller lot. It is still a very big build, so it's going to need a pretty sizable lot, but it might not need a 64 by 64. I think I ended up building it on the island in Windenburg, so it's literally in the middle of nowhere on an island. Ramsey Hall isn't super accessible, apparently. You gotta get on a boat, you gotta float across to the island, all sorts of fun things. Figuring out the tree situation was kind of fun too, because when I was looking at reference images, I just noticed a lot of fun little details, like the little rocks surrounding the trees. I hadn't really noticed that before, and that's something that I was like, oh, well, that's really cute, actually. I want to do that. I want to try and get it as close as I can. And then when I looked at the landscaping in the pictures, it was very bush heavy. Like, it was lots of greens, hedges, and topiary kind of things. There weren't really any flowers, so that's pretty much what I do for the style. When I do landscaping, I try to use basically similar plants throughout the entirety of the lot so that it has a cohesive feel to it. I feel like if I do too many different kinds of things, then it starts to get busy. And I also feel like in most yard spaces, especially in real life, there aren't a huge variety of different kinds of wall spaces. So that's my reasoning for that. I decided to use these hedge objects from the Perfect Patio Stuff pack rather than building a hedge with the fence tool, because the fence tool can't round quite as much as these objects could if I were to just place them individually. So if you look at them from the outside, they are like, you can see some gaps in some places and a couple little lines here and there, but I really wanted it to be more circular than anything else because that's how it is in the game. We have this lovely circular little courtyard that surrounds this awesome oak tree, which I love. I feel like this oak tree looks very similar to the one in the game. And I put benches around it. This is the oak tree that Nancy has to climb when she's chasing after Casper. Definitely wanted to include that in the game. Because of the way that I had to change the floor plan, the window that is directly next to the oak tree is actually from the library and it's not from Corinne's room. So that's probably the biggest difference, is that the dorm rooms that are supposed to be on that side of the building are actually on the opposite side. So that would be Corinne's room and Mel's room. It ends up being functional overall, so it didn't bother me too much, but that is a difference that you will notice. And now we're moving along to kind of the side. Again, I had to look at a bunch of different reference images, so every time I pause, I'm working my way through my walkthrough of this video so I can try and figure out how to make it look as much like the original build as possible. Definitely putting in the fence helped to kind of decrease the space a little bit so then I could make it more full. And I did want to add in the cellar here, so that's what I'm doing right now, is kind of finding a way to add it in. There's no way that I could have done a just regular cellar in the ground, so I have to do kind of this funky little add-on on the side of the building. And I make it look more like a shed, I feel like, than a cellar, but it accomplishes the same thing. And it does end up kind of looking similar. Really, the function is the same, and that's all that matters, is that, like, if Nancy were to go to here in The Sims, it would take her to the same place, which is... that was my goal. And now that we have ladders in The Sims 4, it made it so much easier because I didn't have to fiddle around with all of the stair space that was required, which was awesome. I basically just went through with the Show Hidden Objects cheat on and found as many box items as I possibly could, and it just kind of scattered them around in this basement level to make it look like there was a bunch of clutter down here, because that's basically what the cellar area is used for, as kind of a storage area. And then this over here is supposed to be the boiler in the corner. And I love this area in the game because one of the coolest things, in my opinion, is that you can find old textbooks, which I just think is super interesting. I mean, we can find a textbook that's basically laying out the geography of the United States, but before Alaska and Hawaii were even states, and a bunch of other places were still just territories, which I think is just so cool. I would love to find something like that. That's one of the things I love about this game, is that it connects the history of this building so well to the modern mystery that's going on. The plot itself just ends up being so cohesive, which I love. That's my favorite thing. What's not my favorite thing is spiders, but I put a ton of cobwebs down in that cellar because, let's be real, there's probably some gnarly spiders living in that cellar. I don't know if I'd be able to go in there in real life because I would get so much in my head wondering about all of the gnarly spiders that are in there. That's just how my brain works. Now we're moving on to trying to figure out the roofing. I mentioned, I can't remember if it was the first or the second video, but the first time that I tried to build Waverly Academy, because this is my second attempt at building this entire building. I've been working on it for a long time. The first attempt, I liked the outside a lot more because I started with that when I did my first build. I worked off of the exterior screenshots first and then used those to kind of make a shell of Waverly Academy, and then I put the rooms inside. But when I did that, the library ended up being way too small. So then I decided to use the interior floor plan to help create the outside. But what that ended up doing was making the exterior super blocky, which happens a lot with these Nancy Drew builds, especially the bigger ones. I mean, the Hot Kettle Cafe is essentially just a rectangle. If you saw that build, I had a hard time feeling like the outside was complete because it's just one giant rectangular box. But when you look at it in the game on the outside, there's so much character to it. There's these beautiful towers and like rounded walls, hexagonal walls, all sorts of fun things. But sometimes we just gotta do what we gotta do in The Sims 4, and we don't have any other choice about how to lay out the floor plan. So what I do to try and make it look, I guess, better on the outside, for lack of a better word, is I really try to fill up the wall space with a lot of ivy. So at some point here, we're going to go into the debug menu. I think right here, actually. We're going to go into the debug menu, and I'm going to find the vines from the Discover University pack to basically cover the entire building in vines. I think vines are amazing in real life and in The Sims 4. They give buildings so much more character, in my opinion, and it just makes them feel like they've been a part of the landscape for however many years, centuries maybe. And that's what I love. Like, I think every building looks better with ivy on it. I know some people are probably like, ew, get the ivy off my building. We gotta trim it all. But in my personal opinion, I just love when things look a little bit overgrown. I do that in my yard too. I mean, we have a deck in the backyard, and the bottom of it is surrounded by kind of like this trellis kind of structure, and there are tons and tons of plants that have grown under the deck and are now like poking out of the trellis and weaving their way up and vining their way up around the deck, and I love that. I just think it looks so cool. I have not tried to trim them at all because I love when nature takes over from where humanity has left off and then just does its own thing. I'm definitely a naturey person. I love going hiking. I love being outside. I love plants and I love animals and all that sort of stuff. So when nature just shows how awesome it is and does so many cool things, I'm always super impressed. So, long story short, I liked putting ivy everywhere on this building. It gives the walls a little bit more depth, which they definitely needed because all of the walls are super duper flat. and I wanted them to not be flat. So the ivy goes everywhere. I tried to keep it varied so that it looks like there are different growth patterns in different places. And that's basically how I dealt with the issue that some places were unable to have windows. Particularly this front wall, where you can probably see that I am adding in some vines that also came from the vampire stuff pack, because that whole section is supposed to have windows, but it can't because that whole area is covered by bookcases. So if I were to put windows there, they would literally just be staring at the back of a bookcase. And then what's the point of the window? Not much, unless you want to look at the back wood slats of a bookcase. So I finished that up, and then with all of the ivy, and then I basically continue this trend of putting hedges and bushes around the entirety of the building itself. Just kind of filling it in. I use these bushes, which are also from the debug menu, to just line the building itself, and then I add a little bit of character with taller hedges, taller bushes at all of the corners to, again, give things a little bit more depth and a little bit more intrigue. That's the word of the day, depth and intrigue, or the words of the day, I suppose. But we will be coming up on the screenshots here soon, because this is the last video. This is part 3 of 3 for this massive, massive build of Waverly Academy. I will be putting screenshots of all of the locations in this video. So the screenshot section will be long, but it will give you a comprehensive look at what Waverly Academy looks like as I imagined it in The Sims 4. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video, fellow detectives. If you've made it through all 3 parts of the build videos, thank you so much. That's amazing. I had a lot of fun building this one. It was a little bit stressful because it's so important and such a great build that I really wanted to do it justice. But overall, I am very happy with how it turned out. So I hope you really liked it as well. If you did enjoy this video, please feel free to hit the like button. That kind of engagement really helps us find new fellow detectives. If you are not subscribed, please feel free to hit the subscribe button and turn on notification bells for more Nancy Drew and Sims content, and feel free to leave me a comment and let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.